The nurse smiled at me and said, "Your room is ready." For a moment, I thought she was speaking to someone else. I stood beside my son in the bright, unfamiliar lobby, the smell of disinfectant hanging in the air. The floors shined too much, the lights hummed too loudly, and everything felt strangely permanent. "My room?" I asked quietly. The nurse nodded, checking something on her clipboard. "Yes, Mrs. Carter, we've been expecting you." My chest tightened. I turned slowly toward Michael. He stood beside me, calm and composed, his hands resting lightly on the handles of my purse and coat as if he had already decided where they belonged. "This is just a visit," he said gently. "Remember, a visit." That's what he had told me that morning. He had arrived early, knocking on my door with his usual quiet patience. "I want to show you somewhere," he said, "just so you have options." Options. He used words like that often now. Careful words, safe words. I hadn't wanted to come, but he had insisted. "You'll feel better knowing what's available," he said. So I agreed, because mothers spend their lives trusting their children, even when something deep inside them whispers to be careful. Now, standing in that cold, polished lobby, I wasn't so sure. "There must be some mistake," I said to the nurse. She frowned slightly and checked her papers again. "No mistake," she said. "Your son completed everything yesterday. Everything." The word echoed painfully in my chest. I turned toward Michael again. "What does she mean?" His expression remained calm, almost reassuring. "It's just paperwork," he said quietly. "Standard procedure." The nurse gestured toward a hallway behind her. "If you'll follow me, I can show you your room." My room. The words felt heavier each time she said them. I didn't move. "I'm not staying," I said softly. Michael placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "Let's just look," he replied. His touch felt unfamiliar, not cruel, but firm, certain, as if this moment had already been decided long before I arrived. The nurse waited patiently. Other residents passed behind her, slow steps, quiet faces, empty eyes staring forward. Some sat in wheelchairs. Some held blankets, even though the room was warm. No one looked like they were visiting. They looked like they belonged there. My heart began to pound harder. "I didn't pack anything," I whispered. Michael hesitated for just a second. Then he said something that made the air leave my lungs. "I brought what you need." He lifted a small suitcase. My suitcase. The same one I kept in the back of my closet. The one I hadn't touched in years, because I hadn't planned on going anywhere. And in that moment, standing under those bright fluorescent lights, I realized my son had planned this without telling me. I stared at the suitcase in his hand, unable to speak. It was navy blue, with a small tear near the zipper, one my husband had tried to fix years ago before we took our last trip together. I hadn't opened it since he passed. It had stayed in the back of my closet, untouched, holding nothing but old air and memories. "How did you get that?" I asked quietly. Michael avoided my eyes. I packed a few things, he said. Just essentials, essentials, as if my life could be folded neatly into a small case. I didn't ask you to pack anything. His voice softened, the same gentle tone he had used when I was younger and afraid of thunderstorms. I know, he said, but I wanted to make this easier. Easier. That word again. The nurse cleared her throat politely. If you'd like, we can review your admission forms first, she said, gesturing toward a small desk nearby. Admission, not visit. Admission. My chest tightened painfully. I didn't agree to be admitted, I said firmly. She hesitated, looking between Michael and me. Your son signed the intake paperwork, she explained carefully. He's listed as your legal decision maker. My heart skipped. Legal decision maker. I turned slowly toward Michael. What does that mean? He sighed, as if this was a conversation he had hoped to avoid. It just means I can help make arrangements, he said, so you don't have to worry about complicated things. I never asked for that. His jaw tightened slightly. It's for your safety. Safety. Always safety. The nurse slid a thin stack of papers across the desk. At the top, printed clearly in black ink, was my name. Margaret Carter, resident admission resident. Not guest, not visitor. Resident. My hands trembled as I touched the edge of the page. There was my address, my date of birth, my medical history, everything neatly organized, everything decided, without me. I don't remember signing this, I whispered. Michael spoke quickly. You didn't need to. The words settled like ice in my chest. He must have realized how they sounded, because he added, softer now, I have authority to help you. Authority. I remembered the afternoon he had brought papers to my kitchen table months ago, explaining they would allow him to assist with insurance and prescriptions. You trust me, don't you? He had asked. And I had, because trust had never been something I questioned. Until now. The nurse waited patiently, her eyes kind but distant. Would you like to see your room? She asked again. I looked down the long hallway behind her. Doors lined both sides, closed, quiet, permanent. My throat felt tight. No, I said softly. Michael placed his hand on my arm. Mom, he said, lowering his voice, you can't stay alone anymore. I turned toward him slowly. I've lived alone for 8 years, I replied. He didn't answer, because deep down, we both knew something had changed. Not in me, in him. And as I stood there, surrounded by strangers who already believed I belonged, I realized he hadn't brought me here just to visit. He had brought me here to leave me. I followed the nurse down the hallway, not because I agreed, but because my legs moved before my heart could stop them. The suitcase wheels rolled softly behind Michael, their quiet sound echoing off the polished floor. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself resisted me turning back. Doors lined both sides of the corridor. Some stood slightly open. Inside, I saw glimpses of lives reduced to small spaces, photographs taped to walls, blankets folded neatly on narrow beds, chairs positioned beside windows that barely opened. In one room, an elderly man sat staring at nothing, his hands resting motionless in his lap. In another, a woman whispered softly to herself, rocking gently in place. No one looked like they were visiting. They looked like they had nowhere else to go. The nurse stopped near the end of the hall. "This one," she said gently. She pushed the door open. The room was small, too small. A single bed stood against the wall, a dresser, a narrow window overlooking the parking lot, a chair placed beside the bed, as if someone expected visitors who might not come. And there, beside the door, was a small plastic holder. Inside it, a printed card. "Margaret Carter, my name. Already placed. Already assigned." My breath caught in my throat. "I told you," Michael said quietly behind me. "It's comfortable, comfortable." The word felt like a lie. I stepped inside slowly, my hand brushing the edge of the bed. The sheets were clean, unfamiliar, cold. Michael placed the suitcase beside the dresser. "I brought your night clothes," he said, "and your medications." I turned toward him sharply. "You went through my things." He hesitated. "I had to, as if my permission no longer mattered." I walked to the window. Outside, I could see his car parked near the entrance. Beyond it, the road stretched toward home, toward my house, my kitchen, my chair, my life. "I'm not staying," I said quietly. Michael didn't respond immediately. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You can't take care of yourself anymore." The words struck deeper than anything else he had said. "I take care of myself every day," I replied. He shook his head slightly. "You forget things." Forget. That word again. The same word he had begun using months ago. The same word that made others look at me differently. "I don't forget who I am," I said. His expression softened, but not with understanding, with finality. "This is where you'll be safe. Safe. Always safe." The nurse stepped quietly into the doorway. "Take your time," she said gently. Michael looked at his watch. "I have to get back to work," he said. "Work." As if this were just another appointment. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the dresser. "My house keys." "I'll visit soon," he added. "Soon." He turned toward the door. My heart began to pound, because suddenly I understood what was happening. He wasn't waiting for me to agree. He was waiting for me to accept. And as he stepped into the hallway, I realized he was about to leave me there. "Michael." My voice came out softer than I intended. He paused in the doorway, his hand resting on the frame, but he didn't turn around immediately. For a moment, I thought he might keep walking. Then, slowly, he looked back at me. The hallway light behind him cast his face into shadow, making him look older, unfamiliar. "I'm not staying," I said again. He sighed, the same quiet sigh he used when I disagreed with him as a child. "We've talked about this." "No," I replied. "You talked." I listened. He stepped back into the room, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might overhear. "You've been alone too much," he said. "It's not safe anymore." Safe. That word had begun to lose its meaning. "I was safe yesterday," I said. "I was safe in my own bed." He ran his hand across his forehead, frustrated. "You left the stove on last month." "No, I didn't." "You forgot your medication." "I took it." "You fell in the yard." "I tripped on a rock." Each accusation felt rehearsed, like lines from a conversation he'd already had with someone else, someone who believed him. My chest tightened. "You've been telling people I can't take care of myself." He didn't answer, because silence can be the loudest confession. "I'm still your mother," I whispered. For a moment, something softened in his face, but it disappeared just as quickly. "This is for the best," he said again. He reached into his pocket and placed a folded sheet of paper beside the keys. "If you need anything, the staff will help." Not me, not call me, the staff. He was already separating himself from responsibility. He stepped backward into the hallway. "I'll visit this weekend. Weekend. 3 days away. An eternity." Then he turned and walked. His footsteps echoed against the hard floor. Steady, certain, permanent. I moved quickly to the doorway. "Michael." He didn't stop. He reached the end of the hall, turned the corner, and disappeared. A few seconds later, I heard the distant sound of the front door opening, then closing. The sound echoed through the building, final and unmistakable. Gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty hallway. No one spoke. No one comforted me, because to everyone else here, this was normal. I returned slowly to the room. My room. The words still felt foreign. My keys lay on the dresser, useless now. Beside them, the folded paper waited. I picked it up carefully. At the top, printed clearly in bold letters, were words that made my hands begin to tremble. Property transfer notification. And in that moment, I realized leaving my house had never been temporary. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. The paper trembled in my hands as the words settled into meaning. Property transfer notification beneath it. My address was printed clearly. My home, the place where every year of my life had quietly unfolded. My eyes moved down the page slowly, each line heavier than the last. Ownership transfer initiated under legal authority of designated representative. Designated representative. Michael. He hadn't just brought me here. He had removed me. My knees felt weak, and I sat slowly on the edge of the narrow bed. The mattress dipped slightly beneath my weight, unfamiliar and unwelcoming. He had planned this. Not just the visit, not just the suitcase, everything. The realization spread through my chest like cold water. He hadn't wanted me safe. He had wanted me gone. A soft knock sounded behind me. I looked up. The nurse stood in the doorway, her expression gentle. "Are you all right?" she asked. I forced myself to nod. "Yes." She stepped inside carefully. Transitions can feel overwhelming at first, she said. Transitions. Another careful word. She believed this was my decision. Everyone did. Because Michael had signed the papers. Because Michael had told them I belonged here. Because Michael had spoken for me. She glanced at the paper in my hands. If you need anything, just press the call button beside your bed. I nodded again. She left quietly, closing the door behind her. I stared at the window. Outside, the afternoon light had begun to fade. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, beyond the trees, beyond the unfamiliar streets, my house stood waiting. Empty, or perhaps no longer mine. I imagined the quiet living room, the chair beside the window, the kitchen where I had made tea every morning for 40 years. Strangers would walk through those rooms now, touch those walls, change everything. My chest tightened painfully. Michael had taken my home while I was here, while I was trapped, while I trusted him. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now, not weak, not confused, steady, because beneath the grief, something else had begun to rise. Clarity. He believed distance would make this easier. He believed I would accept it. He believed I had nowhere left to go. But as I sat there in that quiet room, I realized there was one thing he had forgotten completely. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, holding the paper in my hands. Outside my door, I could hear the quiet rhythm of the hallway, distant footsteps, the soft roll of wheels, the faint murmur of voices that didn't belong to me. Everything here moved slowly, carefully, as if time itself had been softened. But inside my chest, something had sharpened. Michael believed I would stay. He believed I would adjust. He believed I would accept the life he had chosen for me. My eyes moved slowly across the room again. The dresser, the chair, the small bedside table, and there, a telephone, simple, beige, placed neatly beside the bed. For a moment, I hesitated, because making a call meant admitting this was real, that I was no longer in my home, that someone else now held the keys. But silence would not protect me. I stood and walked slowly to the table, lifting the receiver. It felt heavier than I expected. I pressed the numbers carefully, my fingers remembering the sequence, even after all these years. It rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered. Hello. My throat tightened. Daniel, I whispered. My grandson paused. Grandma. Tears filled my eyes at the sound of his voice. He had always spoken my name differently than Michael had, without caution, without control. Where are you? He asked immediately. I'm at a care facility, I said quietly. There was silence on the line. What do you mean? He asked. Your father brought me here this morning. Another pause, longer this time. He told me you were visiting a doctor, Daniel said. Doctor, not resident, not permanent. I have papers, I continued, about the house. My voice trembled slightly now, not from fear, but from truth. He transferred it. The silence that followed felt endless. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice lower. He can't do that without telling you. He already did. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Anger, shock, protection. I'm coming, he said. The certainty in his voice steadied me. No, I replied gently. Not yet. He hesitated. I need you to listen first. Because for the first time since Michael had walked away, I understood something clearly. This had never been about my safety. It had been about removing me quietly, and now that I could see it, I wasn't going to disappear without being heard. Daniel arrived the next morning anyway. I was sitting in the small chair beside the window, watching the early sunlight spread across the parking lot, when I saw his car pull in. He stepped out quickly, scanning the building with the same urgency his grandfather once carried. Within minutes, there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it before the nurse could answer. Grandma. He stepped inside and wrapped his arms around me carefully, as if afraid I might break. I'm all right, I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew something inside me had already changed. He pulled back, studying my face. Dad told me you wanted to be here, he said quietly. The words stung. He told them that too. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked around the room slowly, taking in the narrow bed, the small dresser, the single chair. This isn't right, he said. I handed him the paper Michael had left. He read it carefully, his expression growing darker with each line. He transferred the property while you were here, he murmured. I nodded. He brought my suitcase, I added softly. He packed it himself. Daniel lowered the paper. He's been planning this. There was no comfort in hearing it spoken aloud. Only truth. He sat beside me. Grandma, there's something I didn't tell you. My heart tightened. What is it? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Dad came to my apartment 2 weeks ago. I waited. He asked if I thought you were forgetting things. Forget. That word again. He said he was worried. Daniel continued. He said he might need to take responsibility for you. Responsibility. The same careful language. I told him you were fine, Daniel said. That you still cooked, still paid your bills, still remembered everything. He paused. He didn't seem relieved. A cold realization spread through my chest. Michael hadn't been looking for reassurance. He had been looking for agreement. He asked if I thought you'd be happier somewhere else. Daniel added quietly. Happier. The lie beneath the kindness. I told him it wasn't his decision. Daniel's hands clenched slightly. He didn't argue, he said. He just nodded. He looked up at me. I should have told you. I placed my hand gently over his. You didn't know. But Michael had known. He had asked others. He had tested the idea. He had prepared them to believe his version of the truth. Daniel looked toward the window. You still own the house, he said firmly. I hesitated. I'm not sure. He turned back to me. Grandpa made sure of it. My breath caught. He showed me once, Daniel continued. In his will. He said the house was yours for life. No one could take it without your consent. For life. My heart began to beat faster. Michael had never mentioned that. He had spoken only of authority, of responsibility, of safety, never of limits, never of what he couldn't do. Daniel met my eyes. I think he was hoping you wouldn't remember. And in that moment, I realized my son's entire plan depended on my silence. Write part 8, part 8. The papers they didn't want me to read Daniel didn't leave that afternoon. He sat beside me for hours, listening as I told him everything: the suitcase, the admission papers, the notice about the house. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to soften the truth. He simply listened, the way people do when they know something important has been taken. "Do you still have a copy of Grandpa's will?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "It's in the house." The words felt distant now. The house, as if it belonged to someone else. Daniel leaned forward. "Then we need to see it." A quiet knock interrupted us. A nurse stepped inside, offering a polite smile. "Visiting hours end soon," she said gently. Daniel nodded. "I understand." She hesitated, then added, "Your son will be visiting tomorrow morning." My chest tightened. Michael was coming back to check, to make sure his decision was holding. After she left, Daniel turned toward me again. "Did Dad give you anything else?" he asked. I thought for a moment. Then I reached into the drawer beside the bed and removed the folded property notice. He read it carefully. His eyes stopped at the bottom of the page. "What is it?" I asked. He pointed to a small printed section near the signature. "Transfer authorized under power of attorney, full property authority." Daniel frowned. "This only applies if Grandpa's will doesn't restrict it." My breath caught. "And if it does," he looked up, "then he may not have had the legal right to sell it." Hope flickered cautiously inside me. Michael had spoken with such certainty, such calm, as if everything had already been decided. But certainty can hide mistakes. Daniel folded the paper carefully. "I'll go to the house tonight," he said. My heart tightened. He might have changed the locks. Daniel nodded. "Maybe," he paused, then added quietly, "but I still have Grandpa's spare key." The words settled into me like warmth, because my husband had always believed in preparation, always believed in protection, even after he was gone. Daniel stood slowly. "I'll come back in the morning," he promised. I reached for his hand. "Be careful." He squeezed my fingers gently. "I will." After he left, the room felt smaller again, quieter. But something had shifted. Michael believed distance would weaken me. He believed isolation would make me accept his decisions. He believed I had no way back. What he didn't know was that someone was already walking toward my house with the key he thought no one had. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the hallway made my heart lift, hoping it might be Daniel returning sooner than he promised. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second stretching into something longer than time itself. I kept imagining the house. my house, the porch light that flickered when the wind blew too hard, the kitchen chair beside the window, the maple tree in the yard that my husband had planted when Michael was born. I wondered if the lights were still off, if the rooms still smelled the same, or if strangers had already begun changing everything. Morning came quietly. At 8 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. My breath caught. "Come in," I said. The door opened. Daniel stood there. He looked tired, but there was something else in his face. Certainty. "I went last night," he said. My hands tightened around the blanket in my lap. And he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "The house isn't empty." My heart pounded harder. "What do you mean?" He sat beside me. "The sale may be finalized on paper," he explained, "but legally, Grandpa's will still protects your right to live there." Hope rose carefully inside my chest. "I found the will," he continued, "right where you said it would be." He reached into his bag and removed a worn brown envelope. My fingers trembled as I touched it. My husband's handwriting marked the front. Unchanged, unforgotten. Daniel opened it and showed me the page. "There," he said softly. I read the words again. "Lifetime residential rights granted exclusively to Margaret Carter." Lifetime, not temporary, not conditional. Mine. Tears blurred my vision. "He can't remove you," Daniel said firmly. My chest loosened for the first time since Michael had brought me here. "But he already sold it," I whispered. Daniel nodded. "That creates a legal problem for him." For him, not me. Michael had acted with certainty, but certainty without truth can collapse quickly. Daniel hesitated. "There's something else," he said. My heart tightened again. "What?" He changed the front door lock. The words landed heavily. "But Grandpa's old workshop entrance was still the same," Daniel added. A faint smile touched his lips. "I used that key." I could almost see it, the small wooden door at the back of the house, the one my husband had built himself. Michael must have forgotten it existed. Daniel met my eyes. "Everything inside is still yours. The chair, the photographs, the life, untouched." Because Michael had believed removing me would be enough. He had believed distance would make ownership real. But ownership without truth cannot stand forever. Daniel reached for my hand. "We're going to fix this." And for the first time since my son had walked away, I believed him. Michael arrived later that morning. I saw him through the narrow window beside my bed, stepping out of his car with the same calm confidence he had carried the day he left me there. He adjusted his jacket and walked toward the entrance, his expression composed, certain that I was still exactly where he had left me. Daniel stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "He doesn't know," Daniel said quietly. No, he didn't know. A nurse knocked and opened the door. "Your son is here to see you," she said gently. Michael stepped inside. He stopped when he saw Daniel standing beside me. For a moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then he saw the envelope in my hands. The will. His confidence shifted. "What is this?" he asked. I stood slowly. My legs trembled, but my voice did not. "It's the truth," he frowned. "I told you this was temporary," he said carefully. "You'll adjust." "I'm not adjusting," I replied. Daniel stepped forward. "She still owns the right to live in her home," he said firmly. Michael's eyes moved between us. "That's not how power of attorney works," he replied. I opened the will and held it where he could see. "Your father made sure no one could take this house from me," I said. He stared at the page. His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how complicated this is," he said. "No," I replied quietly. "You don't." Silence filled the room. For the first time since this began, Michael didn't look certain. He looked afraid, afraid of what he couldn't control. Daniel spoke calmly. "We've contacted a lawyer." Michael's shoulders lowered slightly. The plan he had built so carefully was beginning to fracture. "I was trying to help," he whispered. I believed that part of him believed it, but help does not remove someone from their life without their voice. Help does not pack a suitcase in secret. Help does not erase someone's home. 2 days later, Daniel drove me back. I sat in the passenger seat, watching familiar streets appear one by one. My heart beat faster with each turn. When the house came into view, tears filled my eyes. The maple tree stood exactly as it always had. The porch, the windows. Waiting, Daniel parked and helped me out. For a moment, I simply stood there, breathing in the air, feeling something inside me return. He unlocked the workshop door at the back. The old key still fit. I stepped inside slowly. The living room was quiet. Sunlight stretched across the floor. My chair still stood beside the window. Nothing had changed, because it had always been mine. I walked to the center of the room and rested my hand against the wall my husband had built. Strong, steady, unmoved. Michael visited weeks later. He didn't argue. He didn't ask me to leave. He simply sat across from me, quiet, understanding at last what he had almost taken. Trust does not disappear in a single moment, but it can fracture quietly. And sometimes, the greatest strength we carry is not in fighting those we love, but in remembering that our voice still belongs to us. Thank you for being here and listening. If this story touched you, please tap the like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. And if you feel comfortable, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from or sharing a small part of your own story.